Dean understandably looks surprised to hear Sam say such a thing. Sam says it could have gone a whole other way after their mother's death. A little more tequila, a little less demon hunting, and they would have had Max's childhood, and all things considered, they turned out okay thanks to him. Dean says all things considered and then gets in the car.
Did they?
They didn't turn out okay, but, like, at least they're not serial killers that kill humans.
I mean, did they turn out okay?
No.
I don't think so.
Fenders.
Did that have anything to do with John? Also, I don't think so.
No, they did
No,
not.
literally.
Turn out
It was
okay.
in spite of John.
Like, literally, like, every single thing about them that did turn out similar was because of John.
Also, John drank, and John was abusive, neglectful, emotional abuse, physical abuse that we might not have had that
Yes,
entirely spelled
literally.
out for us at this point.
Yeah,
But we definitely
no.
know
It's
that
implied.
John was abusive. And what Sam is inadvertently and unintentionally telling me here is that if John wasn't abandoning them in motel rooms to punch werewolves, he'd have been punching the kids. That's what I'm hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
A little more tequila, a little less demon hunting. That sounds like, oh, if your dad was stuck at home with you all of the time, he would have been hitting you.
Right.
Like, he has an outlet for violence. He's
Yeah.
not taking it out on his kids all the time.
His 4-year-old and his baby.
And this is why I have such a hard time, like, sympathizing when people are like, oh, well, he did his best, he was in a hard situation. I'm like, no.
Okay, your best does not look like that.
Right.
I think that also the reason that Dean cares so much about his mom is that if you only have one parent and, you know, they weren't that great before your mom died, and then your mom dies, and then
Right.
that one parent gets even worse, I feel like you have to hold on to how good the other parent was.
Right,
Whether
right.
that was real or not. Like, I think, you know, you just build them up in the head. You're like, oh, if they were
Yeah.
here, then it would all be better. It would all be perfect. Like, if it was just them.
And they definitely
I've-
hint to that in the show.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard that kind of referred to as you have this Eden that you need to
Yeah.
retreat to when things get bad.
Exactly.
And that happens with anyone who's going through a tough time, but people in the Winchester situation, like Sam and Dean, they would need something like that even more just to be
Mhm.
sane.
Exactly. In the next scene, Dean's wearing a red overshirt, which was not one of the many layers he was wearing in a previous scene, which means that they've changed. And Sam's shirts are also entirely different, so this seems like a different day. But this red overshirt is a Dean Winchester closet staple because it is making appearances well into the later seasons. Definitely
that
season 10. Do you really?
Yep.
It's a great shirt.
Nice.
I remember when I wrote these notes, I was my friend was starting season 10 for the first time. I was like, oh, hey, it's that same shirt that I just saw Dean wearing in season 10.
Awesome. Love it when they repeat outfits on shows. It's more realistic.
Me too.
Yeah.
And also, Dean grows into the shirt. It's really big on him in this scene. He grows
Yes.
into it.
Oh my gosh. I think we talked about this.
I think
or
so,
I talked
too.
about it with someone.
I made a TikTok about it like a month ago when I
Yes,
wrote my
and
notes.
I think we went back and forth in the comments about it.
Sam is trying to put the blame on them, specifically himself, for what happened to Max, and Dean assures him that it's not his fault and it's not about him. It's about the thing that killed their mom, which they're gonna find and kill. Sam tells Dean about moving the giant cabinet telekinetically, which is a little bit surprising to me. This usually feels like something that Sam would just like keep to himself and not talk about. I'm kind of glad.
I'm just gonna
He's
bury
trying to be
that with all
open.
my trauma.
Dean's response is, oh, right.
That's a thing.
Literally, that's it. That's literally all he says. And then nothing for about a minute. He's like quiet for like a long time, and then he's like, can you bend this spoon?
That's such an on-brand thing for Dean, though. Like, he's gonna take a long time to, like, think through the thing, and then immediately his next thought is like, wait, but what about those classic movies?
Sam says he couldn't control it, and Dean's like, well, I'm sure that you won't do that again. And Dean's kind of right.
Yeah.
I don't like that he's right, but he is.
Never comes up again.
For real.
I'm really glad to see a couple of things here. One is that Dean is rolling his clothes, which is how I like to pack.
Me too!
Me
And then
three.
also his / John's leather jacket is on the bed with the clothes he's packing. He's not really like wearing it. It's just on the bed, prominent, like he's gonna put it on.
Mm-hmm.
Dean says that he knows Sam won't turn into Max because he's got an advantage Max didn't him.
That's true.
And I love that. He's like, oh, you got me. And then he pulls on their dad's jacket, which looks really good on Jensen.
Yes, it does.
Dean promises that as long as he's around, nothing bad is gonna happen to Sam, which I feel like is something he said so many times.
Yup.
He then suggests that they should use Sam's psychic powers to cheat their way through Vegas, because in the world of Dean Winchester, anything resembling real emotions must be accompanied by deflective humor.
Yup.
But also, if it's in your life now and you can't get it out, might as well take advantage of it.
Sam is literally startled into silence by this joke. He was like, I thought we were having a moment, and then the moment ended and went into a different direction, and he's like, has nothing to say. Dean then has like a close-up shot where he's not smiling. Sam like turns and Dean like stops smiling and he closes the door and he follows Sam to the car, and that's the end of the episode.
Yay!
It's like a moment where Dean's like jokey, and as soon as Sam's back's turned, he's like, shit, this is bad.
Yup. Gotta love that.
I have a couple thoughts on Max, actually.
Okay, yeah, hit us with some thoughts on Max.
Yeah, so remember when we did the shapeshifter episode, how I was talking about, like, the shapeshifter kind of expanded the possibilities for monsters?
Mm-hmm.
So Max continues that. He complicates the idea of what a monster is and how they come to be. And as with the shapeshifter, violence doesn't need to be inherent to his nature. Like, he doesn't need to kill people, but he decides to. He wants to. Except Max is like the fully realized form of this concept, because he's far more sympathetic than the shapeshifter, and we know that he could have turned out differently, like Sam.
I totally agree. I hadn't thought to word it like that, but you're 100% correct. I always think of that shift as with, I want to say season 2, episode 3 with Gordon is always where I see like that, the bulk of that shift towards like redefining like what is a monster and what's not a monster. But
Right.
yeah, you're actually totally right. There's been some other episodes already that we've covered that have had similar themes, but this one, it really is like actually pretty heavy with that particular theme.
Yeah, like he could have been very different, but he wasn't because of his environment.
Yeah, I watched Once Upon a Time for a really long time, and nature versus nurture is a big like theme. You know, evil isn't born, it's made on that show. And I think Supernatural, honestly, you know, it plays with that idea quite a lot.
Yeah, like even later in the series, we see some of the more traditional monsters that need to kill things to survive, and we see like maybe they could turn out differently too.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Did you have anything else about Max? Let's start with total death counts. This week we saw 3 deaths, bringing our on-screen total to 134, and the on and off-screen total for this episode was 4, because Max's mom. And that brings the on and off-screen total to 810 plus.
Well done.
Yeah, good times. Lots of death.
Fair enough.
We also tried to assign an MVP of the week, so let's see who our guest would like to nominate as this week's most valuable person. Let's start with Jordan.
I would say Sam, because Sam got them their case of the week. Sam got them to the person who was responsible for all the killing, but unfortunately, you know, that's how it ended.
Yep, that sounds right. Julia.
I think I'm gonna have to think on this one.
Okay, let's see what Meredith thinks.
I also did Sam, because this was a very Sam-centric episode.
Yeah, I also gave this one to Sam. Dean literally would have got himself killed. We literally saw it in Sam's premonition. If Dean had been alone, he would have been dead.
And I just would have accepted it, apparently.
Meredith
Like,
would have
he'll
gone,
be back.
that's fine.
He'll be back. Death isn't permanent.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go with Sam too, because I'm trying to think. I don't think literally any of the other characters in this were like really praisable.
Julia likes to give it to non-main characters.
No,
I do that sometimes too, because it's fun.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge the
I don't
hardworking
know.
characters.
yeah,
Julia, the last 2 times that you've been on, you've done non...
I don't know. I don't know why. Yeah, that's a thing, I guess. But like, I don't know. Like this one, like every other character except for, I mean, I guess no. Like Dean had that one brain cell moment, but that was it. Like it really was Sam. But like literally every other character was like a piece of crap in this.
So yeah, I think Sam definitely overwhelmingly had it this week. Next, this show has so few women that the Bechdel test is almost not worth doing this week.
I think we only had Alice.
Alice was the only woman to even be on this episode. She was named. Eventually, she did have a name. It took me the whole episode to learn it. So there was no other women for her to talk to, and she pretty much only talked about Max and her husband and the abuse that she just let her kid suffer. I'm absolutely 100% certain that Alice Miller was also a victim of abuse.
And maybe that's why she didn't say anything.
Like, I almost guarantee if they were hitting the kid, they were hitting the wife. Like,
I mean, neither of them can fight back.
Like, I mean, I don't even know if she could have taken him because Max wasn't her actual, like, son. She was, like, he was her stepson.
Yeah, like, we just have, like, Max's version of the events, so we don't know what she was going through. And Max wouldn't really have been seeing the situation from all angles anyway.
Yeah, I don't love the idea of her standing by and watching it happen, but I can definitely see why she maybe didn't prevent it from happening. I'm sure she was also a victim in this household.
Even if they weren't beating her, she probably was scared that she might be next.
I'm sure. Anyway, just does not pass the Bechdel test. Doesn't even try, honestly. They weren't even concerned about that this week.
They don't even try to develop her as a character.
Really?
Like, we just had a whole discussion about how she could have been facing some of the same stuff that he was, and they were just like, yeah, we're just not gonna do that. Not even gonna
even throw that possibility out there. This week's case of the week was a scared kid from an abusive home with some psychic abilities. I don't know who has notes on this.
I have a bunch of notes on prophetic dreams.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Yes, because like Sam's prophetic dreams really take center stage in this episode, so I thought, let's do that.
Might as well cover it now, because I'm sure when we get to later prophetic dreams, we're not gonna have time to.
Oh yeah, I was gonna look up recent examples where people had dreams like Sam's, but then I thought, screw it, I just survived my midterms and I want to have fun. So
Yay.
I pulled some examples from memory, and the rest of this is just some literary analysis.
Love that.
All right, so dreams are widely considered to carry messages, and that's been a thing throughout history in basically every part of the world. And the interpretation of dreams to predict the future is called oneiromancy. It's from the Greek words oneiros, meaning dream, and manteia, meaning prophecy. So you see this a lot in the Bible, where God will often send people visions in their dreams. You can also see this a lot in ancient history, especially with figures that are so old and cool that they've got like their own little mythological tradition, like Cyrus the Great, who we'll be discussing later. Let's see. Oh yeah, prophetic dreams are a really popular literary trope that has a lot of good uses, and it's not just the future. Like, dreams in general are used all the time. In many stories, dreams are used by the author as a convenient and visual form of exposition. Like, you see this a lot in the Percy Jackson series. Like, often the protagonist will go to sleep and have like plot-relevant visions of the past or present, and we'll see what the villains are up to, or maybe the backstory of another character, or we'll have a lucid dream where we're chatting with a mysterious and omniscient character. And that's important because like the character can get some rest, but will still further the plot. I use this all the time. Okay, circling back to prophecy, I've seen dreams about the future take on two main forms. They're either literal or figurative, and each one has pros and cons. I think the most common form in visual media, like TV and comics, is what we see on Supernatural.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to do it, to adapt it for screens.
Oh yeah, like Sam sees literal flashes of the future presented without context and are very open to interpretation. Like, it's up to him to figure out what to do with them. Obviously, the advantage here is that we immediately have some idea of what's going to happen and who will be involved. The disadvantage is that we can't get the full context from just a few scenes, as we see here. So there's often a lot of conflict and drama as the characters try to figure out what needs to happen for this vision to come true or not to come true. Usually they'll interpret it the wrong way at first, because then we get some plot twists.
Love that.
Let's see, the other one is far more common in history and mythology. The oneiromancer will have a detailed vision loaded with symbolism. And I actually have two major characters in my novel who have visions like this, so I know that this is a very fun and interesting way to see the future.
I was so excited to find out that there was a word for what oneiromancy is. Like, I was familiar with the concept, but I was not familiar with the term, and I'm a fan.
It's just so much easier when you have a fancy word to put to it.
Yes.
Like, as a writer, you can do a lot with this. Like, it's a lot of fun to come up with, like, meaningful symbols and ways to basically give your readers spoilers without being too obvious about it.
Yeah.
Now, the disadvantage here is that you need to interpret the dream first. It's not usually the case for Abrahamic prophets, because I guess they just have an easier time with this, but like for other people, there's a longer process of figuring out what the symbols mean and how they all fit together. In real life, psychologists like Freud came up with lists of like common motifs in dreams and what they could symbolize. He'd use this as a way to look into someone's subconscious, though most of his symbols are about sex, because it's freaking Freud. But in fiction, the advantage is that this kind of vision tells a larger story. You're not limited to viewing like short character interactions and having to extrapolate the context. You can take much broader strokes. An example of this is in the book of Genesis, when Joseph, of like the Technicolor Dreamcoat fame, is able to see the next 14 years of Egypt's future just from 2 dreams the pharaoh had. And if you've seen Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, congratulations, you have that song stuck in your head now. Because I do.
My uni actually did Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat last year, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's a good musical. All right, now I have a few other examples. This form of prophecy is very often how biblical prophets will see the future. And if you know anything about the book of Revelation, then you know how complex this stuff can get, because that entire book is one big prophetic dream. But we're not going to get into Revelation